Welcome to Dhamma on the Sidewalk, insights, interviews, and practical tips on the teachings of the Buddha for people of all walks of life, attuning, exploring, integrating the teachings in everyday life. Simple Dhamma for daily life. I'm Asoka, hosting Dhamma Capsule for people like you. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Musings on precepts and the simplicity of living with precepts. So it follows up on the previous episodes on those musings, which were triggered by a number of questions and comments that I received while I was in the West or in Europe for several weeks, twice this year. So in other words, out a bit of sort of a comfort zone of living with either like-minded persons or definitely living in a monastery. And here I'd like more to focus on when I hear myself explaining or laying out some of the key principles that somehow hold the whole Buddhist philosophy together, regardless of any branches, any schools, any traditions, but just pure, I would say, pure teachings, pure Buddhism, how to say, in a few words. And I found myself in situations where I had, to answer a few questions, and I said, okay, how am I going to say this in simple terms without being either pedantic, rhetoric, or sounding, proselyting? Eventually, it's very simple. It revolves all around intention. The intention to do something that is in accordance with the teachings is the result of having the intention, of having set up the intention, conscious intention, to take a step back and start observe the mind intricacies, take a step back and start observing our own behavior. Take a step back and say and ponder, how can I do this in another way that is more in tune with integrity, with the higher virtues, which is more wholesome is the term that is used in Buddhism. How can I get grasp somehow of my karma and lay it out and have a positive influence on it, a wholesome influence on it? And therefore I found myself again having to define karma in very simple terms. That is not faith, and is not some sort of destiny that is absolutely uncontrollable. Rather, that karma means actually action, and it actually means intentional action. You set up an intention to observe, to really observe how you're doing things and trying to doing it in a better way. Now, what's better, wholesome and unwholesome, that goes into the teachings of the Buddha, and there are a number of principles that are laid out. When someone takes the intention, the conscious intention, to review one's own life and say, okay, I can do something, I can change something, and the trigger might be as diverse as there are human beings in the world. The trigger might be from trauma, the trigger might be from taking a decision that changes completely the course of one's life for instance, from completely unwholesome actions, the triggers might be very, very diverse. And it might have been already simmering. For instance, someone who is interested in meditation, or someone who is interested in different type of alternative ways of doing things, or someone who just has already, as they say in Buddhism, set up the intention earlier on in another life earlier on. But even without removing even that idea that there might be a previous life and there could be another life after, just removing even that as an hypothesis and taking it really as simple as possible and say, in this life, what it is possible that I do that takes me out of an unwholesome circle of actions or behaviors or even connections that I have with certain people. So everyone has its own way of coming into this decision to intentionally, okay, take a step back. And once we take a step back, we start observing things then in a different way. And if you then start practicing either meditation or proper mindfulness, or even just mindfulness of breathing, or even take yoga classes, or do any practice that looks at the inner self, the inner life, and that fades away, that understands the fading away of the inner life and the outer life. There is this duality that is often there in majority of people. There is me, and then there is the reality outside. But actually, these two things are completely connected. So if we start transforming the core of how we function, automatically the outer reality changes as well. Makes sense. So once we are already somehow inspired by having a look at how we do things, so the core inner self, then automatically things will start unfolding in the reality that manifests that change in a way or another. Might be just different connections, different people, different interests. And also accepting the fact that this doesn't happen overnight. It just takes time, and the resolve might also fluctuate. It might fluctuate. Some day is a full head into it, and some days you start having doubt. And here, the Buddha actually said, don't take my teachings as blind faith, in other words. Just witness for yourself. And just witness for yourself how these things can work for you. So there might be this interest of having a look at how the Buddha was giving his teachings and how other people are doing it, and start triggering a different mechanism of functioning. Now, if we had that intention earlier on, then all this can come as a realization that, okay, maybe this is now the time that I can start taking some steps back in a more definitive way. And that's what's called coming into renunciation. And renunciation, again, following up on what I was saying in the other episode, is renunciation doesn't have to be something that takes you to harsh conditions. It might be for some people, but that's their acceptance. That's their way of doing it. So we all have different ways to learn certain things or to change, transform. We don't know. So we can only see for ourselves and work for ourselves. And renunciation might be that in some cases I renounce to some sort of relationships, or I renounce eating in the evening. I decide to follow certain precepts. So renunciation is actually simplifying life, because it just removes a number of knots that just as simple as, there's nothing to eat this evening. Do I really actually have to eat this evening? So this is why the precepts are there. And looking at the precepts, they are actually very, very simple. And they are based on what? So at the core of the Buddhist teachings, there is intention and the Four Noble Truths, right? So the impermanence, whatever is arising is ceasing. The suffering that comes from observing this reality and being attached to this idea that things could be permanent. Attachment is a very important aspect in the Four Noble Truths. And the fact that we take things personally, so we attach even more importance to certain things, and that creates another layer of constraints and difficulties, and can veil the understanding of the reality. And then the fourth one is, that there is a way out of all of this, and that there is no duality between somehow the inner world and the outer world. So this is a very simplified version of reading the Four Noble Truths. So attachment is rooted in desire and in clinging and in reproducing that. So that's where the actual hot iron is. That's where the whole behavioral tendencies are actually rooted in desire, clinging, attachment. Without going into technical jargon, let's just put it that the example of not eating in the evening and the renunciation, renouncing on a number of aspects in life, could be, for instance, just as simple as that: not lying, not taking what is not given, and not eating at night. For instance, just take these. First one, not killing, not taking the life of any human being. I will leave it alone for now because it comes into a whole, it's an important one. It's really an essential one. It's the first one. But it will take me into a whole other realm. I want to focus on this not eating at night, because when we live as a renunciant out of a monastery without the actual, I would say, clothing, the outlook of being a monastic, it just puzzles people. They make jokes about it, and it's okay. And so it has been, for me, it has been very significant also in understanding how is this working. So not eating at night is a way of maintaining this renunciation going. I'm not letting go into the desire, into the clinging, into the attachment of having a very good meal or even just something. So it just entrains the mind and therefore even entrains the body to accept it. So eventually there have been a number of times where, either because I was traveling, so there had been a different time zone, or because I found myself of having traveled and not eaten and found myself in a situation where I was really needing food in the evening and I have had a light meal. So the body takes it a bit. The body is not really reacting very well to that. It says, I'm not really used to this. So it actually becomes a way of life. And that sort of renunciation of letting go of all our desire and clinging and attachment is actually becoming a sense of freedom. It makes just life so much simpler. And it actually creates this layer of lightness that is, and it keeps the discipline going. And it's an intention that needs to be renewed. Why am I doing it? Is it good to do this? Is it wholesome? Am I being too stringent with myself? And then eventually people will understand. Eventually, it's not important. You don't have to take it too seriously either. It just makes life much easier. So at the root of everything at the root of the teachings, and how one who isn't a monastic, or maybe who wanted to be a monastic but hasn't had the actual conditions put together for that to happen. And that's okay. We can remain lay and follow the precepts and follow the teachings and living the Dhamma in accordance to the Dhamma, just running a normal life. It is possible. And it's just important to always remind ourselves that there is intention to maintain, and a very soft way to maintain this intention of reviewing and constantly being mindful of how we function, basically, and how we manage or navigate in this world outside the monastery, so outside a monastic setting, how we navigate the realm of craving, clinging, attaching to things, and how we let go of some aspects and might fall into greedy, and how we find a middle way in all of that. It is okay for someone who's very, for instance, overweight, to just choose a more comfortable seat on an airplane, and they can't say, oh, you practice Buddhism and you go and travel first class. That doesn't work. That person can't sit in an economy seat. It's just not possible. It's just not comfortable for a 12-hour flight to sit because the person is overweight. So yes, could lose some weight, but sometimes there are conditions that make that difficult. So it's okay. Or someone who is very tall, for instance. I'm taking this example because these are really mundane things of moving in the world. Buses, cars, taxis, airplanes, trains. And the Buddha also said, you take care of the body to continue to practice the Dhamma. It's important because the body is what we have been given in this life to meet the Dhamma, or the body is what we have been given to just function in this life. So it is important to maintain the body. And if it's not really, am I greedy by buying a ticket first class? Or am I just being more comfortable because it's very stringent? It's very restraining it's very uncomfortable for me to travel in a different way. That's how we can manage, and finding a middle way. So it has to do with intention. Renunciation has to do with intention. And that intention is rooted in cleaning up the karmic knots, cleaning up one's own life, cleaning up the truck in which the person leads his or her own life, the journey, cleaning it up. And that's the intention. So intention is very, very key for the karma. And that's what holds it all together. For this life, the previous one, and the next one, if we want to go further into understanding how the Buddhist philosophy and the cosmology and the cosmogony is elaborated. To conclude, let me just lay out what the precepts are. And there are only eventually 8. And these are: first one, do not take the life of any living creature. Do not take what is not given. Do not have harmful sexual behavior, or sexual behavior that can harm others, or have celibacy. 4, do not lie. 5, do not take intoxicants, things that dull the mind. So intoxicants, alcohol, and things like that. 6, Do not eat after the afternoon, evening. So do not eat after the zenith, unless there are medical conditions or other prescriptions. 7, do not and have adornment, makeups, perfumes, and entertainment and things like that, dancing and things like that. And the last one, 8, do not sleep, do not use a high and luxurious sleeping place. So be contented with the kind of sleeping place you have. These are 8. There's that distinct the 8 precepts for the lay persons and the monastics is that one of them is divided in 2, and in their adornment, entertainment, all of that is also you give up all the financial aspect. For the monastics, is the 8th precept is divided in 2. So there's a dancing, singing, music, and going to see entertainments is separated from the wearing makeup, garlands, using perfumes, and beautifying the body with cosmetics. So that's divided in 2. So that becomes 9. And the 10th is undertaking the precept to refrain from accepting gold and silver, and that is also money. So we take away the money. So these are the 10 precepts for novices and bhikkhus. Then generally the 8 precepts are for lay people, lay practitioners who live in the monastery together with the sangha. So that makes the rules for basically for everyone. And that's why often lay people can be the ones who are taking care of finances and other administrative aspect for the sangha, driving as well for the sangha. And lay practitioners can also choose to take only 5 precepts. So that goes all the way up to and stops at the intoxicant. That's 5 precepts. Most of the time, most people take 5 precepts once a week, once a month. I mean, it depends. It really depends. But if you also possible to follow 8 precepts. And fundamentally, this is what I have chosen to do. And continuing living in a normal life, in the samsara normal life, out of a monastery, I handle money, I handle other things, basically like a novice, like those who are often in the Theravada tradition, dress up in white and also called anagarikas. The precepts are also taken usually for 24 hours. And then the vows are being renewed. This is in the Theravada. The vows are being renewed on a regular basis. But that doesn't mean that one can let go. It's just because it's all in the mind. It's all about intention, and there's a sort of lightness towards it. So it's not for life. In Theravada, there's nothing that is prescribed for life. Everything is revolving around that intention and around that wholesome behavior that one wants to establish in their life. So I hope I have clarified a number of questions, and obviously there's a lot more to it, but I thought it would be good to put sometimes a personal touch to these conversations and why am I doing what I'm doing. And thank you for being with us.